Hi, everyone, and welcome to another show of the Final Frontier podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Penaranda, and I'm joined with an incredible guest today and the first female on the show. So very great milestone. Her name is Emeline Paat-Dahlstrom, and she's CEO of SpaceBase New Zealand. She has an incredible background and incredible experience. And today's topic, we're going to cover democratizing space. So without further ado, Emeline, it's an absolute pleasure to have you with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Oh, of course. So before we jump into our topic, why don't you share with us a little bit about your background and what got you started in the space industry?
Yeah, so I'm originally from the Philippines, and I was born during the Apollo era. So actually, Buzz Aldrin was doing his first basically spacewalk on Gemini during the time that I was born. So I'm pretty old. And so I grew up in the Philippines. I did my undergrad in physics. But I mean, even prior to that, I've always been in love with space, loved Star Trek and Star Wars, but there wasn't really a lot of opportunity back there. But I got a scholarship to the International Space University like about 30 years ago now, so I'm pretty old. And that sort of like got me started. And after that, did my master's in Earth and Space Science in Canada. I kind of like moved around. I became a global nomad, lived in Europe, then immigrated to the US as well, and met my husband, who's a rocket scientist, and basically worked for a number of space startup companies in the US, including a space tourism company called Space Adventures, which is the first one that sent private citizens to space. Worked for a couple of educational institutions, including the International Space University, Singularity University in Silicon Valley, and led kind of like was the space lead there in the department, and then moved to New Zealand about 4.5 years ago as an Edmund Hillary Fellow. So yeah, that's sort of kind of like a little bit of my background.
Wow, so almost your entire professional career has been focused around space.
Yeah.
That's really incredible, and thank you for sharing that with us. Could you describe to us what democratization of space means to you?
Yeah, so this really came on like about 5 years ago. It took me 50 years to really think about sort of my mission, my massive transformational purpose, which is an MTP, where I've always been in love with space, but at the same time, it's not until I kind of like watched the movie, I'm sure you've watched the movie Elysium, where in that movie, basically it's a dystopian one where, the powers that be actually did make it to space and are living quite well. But then the rest of the world basically is, left in a dystopian Mad Max universe. And for me, that's not the future that I want humanity to go to. There's a lot of opportunity that's happening today, but the gap between the kind of like the haves and the have-nots is getting bigger. So for me, democratization of space is really not just democratization of technology for those that have it, but really for those that do not have it. So I'm focused on making sure that everybody has equal opportunity for all countries around the world to be able to be part of this global space economy.
Great. And many people would argue that these billionaires, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Sir Richard Branson, they say that we have other problems to solve here on Earth, and that they shouldn't be spending their wealth in their space ventures. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I see the space industry paralleling sort of the aviation industry, where in the beginning of kind of like the 19th century, it's only the sort of the rich and well-heeled who has the opportunity and really the funding to be able to actually go on a plane flight. During that time, yes, that is the case, but at the same time, over years, when it became commoditized, then regular people finally get to go and fly. And today we almost don't think about it. Like everybody just goes and flies. So I think that's really what's happening here, where yes, potentially the billionaires are the ones because they have the funding, but they are opening up and bringing the technology kind of like with them, and so the development of space will then eventually, hopefully, become commercialized and then commoditized. So that's one thing. The other thing to also that I always think about is that today there are problem solvers and visionaries. And for sure, we've got a lot of problems here on Earth. And rightly so, we need to focus on those problems and finding solutions for those problems. But at the same time, I think it's worth really also thinking about the long-term future for humanity. And so it's just like another analogy here is that you're saving for your 401k for your retirement, and you set aside like 5%, or maybe that's even small for your retirement fund. But today, if you think about even just with government in the U.S., the NASA budget is only 0.5% of the total budget of the government. So I think it's worth setting aside like a percentage of funding to actually look at the future and where we're going, so that explorers and visionaries can actually work on making sure that we have a future as well. And that's I think that justifies the reason why we are concentrating on focusing on space to a certain extent, than not just things on Earth. But also at the same time, the space industry actually today, 75% of this global space economy is focused on applications. It's not really launches at all, or infrastructure. So which means that applications for Earth is more dominant, which means that the space industry is actually focusing on solving problems.
And that's a great answer and a great point, because most of the media coverage covers launch vehicles. That actually makes just a small sliver of the entire, so many benefits come from the satellites that are in LEO to GEO today. So what are the current barriers in place that are keeping smaller companies from being involved in the space industry?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Well, for one, I think I look at it in three things. One is I think there's a mind shift that needs to happen, especially with developing and emerging countries, where most of those countries think that again, that it's too expensive, like it's too far away to even think about. Let's concentrate on our own problems. I think so. I think there's that mind shift that needs to change, where today the barriers to entry for being part of the space industry because of technology has really all gone down. And so today you only need a computer and Wi-Fi to really be part of the ecosystem. So that's one. The other thing is, if that mind shift changes, then you need to start capacity building. So that's true, like education, having potential government projects and programs that can incentivize the younger generation to see space as a career path for them. And that kind of like takes time. So sometimes it takes years because you have to have a systemic change that needs to happen within like a country or a region. And then the third part of it is that for those who've actually taken the red pill and actually has that vision, the main problem, not even just for smaller countries, but everywhere, is funding. So I think today that's really the most important kind of challenge that is happening with startups. But also, if you look at the trend for investment just in the past 5 years, the trend for traditional either VCs or investors are now beginning to look at the space industry as a viable investment, and so therefore, even with COVID, the amount of investment that is happening in the space industry is actually increasing. which is a really good thing.
What would be some examples of those lower barrier to entry applications that these smaller countries can look at?
Yeah, so I actually think that just like while we're here in New Zealand, this is relevant because that's sort of the things that we're doing here. We're prototyping in New Zealand and trying to think of what can a country or a region do when there is not an inherent space ecosystem or space community within. And I actually think that it can be done from grassroots level, so from bottoms up, and then also from top down, from government. So what we've sort of like done here is like creating ecosystems to build those communities, and that's as easy as just creating, a meetup group in a city that can sort of like start collaborating and creating a sort of like an association or a community ecosystem where the people that are already in the ecosystem can actually help those that are not. So there's those kinds of things. There's also the potential for creating incentive prices, either by government or by independent organizations, which is sort of like what we've done as well, to incentivize innovation and get people to really look at solving important issues and problems within a location, but leveraging space technology kind of for it. And with that, you can certainly develop new products and services sort of within the industry. There's certainly potential for doing grants as well from government that could incentivize the potential also for creating either funds, space funds, or also incubators that can help also the ecosystem that's happening, which is sort of like happening in Australia at the moment, and there's a lot of those kinds of initiatives as well. And then also even just re-education, for which again we're trying to do, and looking at adjacent industries. So adjacent industries that have almost the same technologies and skills that can be ported to focus on space products and services.
Great. And how can leading countries like the USA, ESA, India give a helping hand to some of these smaller countries?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. I think partnerships definitely help a lot. So, for example, there's this big push for going back to the moon. And there's the Artemis program, which, of course, NASA is putting a lot of funding into. But then at the same time, they're also encouraging participants from different countries to actually also be part of that program. So now, Australia, I think South Korea, are also putting in some emphasis and funding to be part of it, and also just partnerships between universities as well, because there's definitely a lot more opportunity for organizations and universities to like say piggyback on a mission in the US, and the payloads or the experiments that go on those payloads or satellite could be a result of a partnership between different countries. There's an organization called UNISEC Global, which is from Japan. So Japan also, of course, has been having a lot of activities in the space industry for decades. And so there's this organization that is helping educate other countries, other developing countries, for how to create and manufacture satellites and CubeSats. So it's sort of like a way of trying to get other countries to also develop the know-how, and so that for the future they can actually do it themselves.
Oh, that's incredible. And some people would think to build a space program, you have to build a rocket, and and launch vehicles and invest, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars into developing that technology so that they could have that capability much shorter put to establishing some sort of presence in space, and probably even, better use out of it and a better return on investment is smaller satellites. So Earth observation, for instance, to bring some situational awareness about their region. So yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, and just to point out, as you said, the most visible thing in the space industry is the rockets and the rocket ships, which the whole supply chain for the space industry and missions, again, from satellite applications, remote sensing, manufacturing, to even space agriculture, to life sciences. All of these things are a lot more easier to basically penetrate and be part of, because the barriers to entry for all of these segments of the industry is much easier. And again, as I mentioned before, most of the investment and most of the revenue that's coming from the global space economy is coming from all of these, which are not as for most people, probably the wow factor is not there, but really they're the ones that making the difference.
Absolutely. And you're the current CEO and co-founder of SpaceBase New Zealand. Would you share a little bit about your company and its initiatives?
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, we came to New Zealand about 4 years ago. And it was born out of my desire as well to this notion of the democratization of space and bringing equal opportunity, and to prototype in New Zealand to think about how can you actually create ecosystems. So that's the main mission of SpaceBase. The short term is to help catalyze and grow the space industry here in New Zealand. And we're doing that through different ways, through educational programs. So we do training as well for adjacent industry, to look at potentially space as a viable economic development pathway, to incentive prices as well. So we've already delivered 3 national, or actually we're on the 3rd one, national space competitions, where you focus on a problem, and then how do you leverage space technology for it. And this time around, we are working on a challenge called Space for Planet Earth. So focusing on climate change, particularly carbon sequestration and coral health, and how do you leverage space data to actually monitor, measure better those. And it's open to New Zealand, Australia, and the Pacific Islands, where the price goes up to like $30,000 New Zealand, to more data, then also mentorship. And we also do a bunch of consulting as well for local government. We do due diligence as well for investors that are looking for space startups. And then we also advise space startups as well.
Great. And you also authored a book called Realizing Tomorrow, The Path to Private Spaceflight. Can you share a little bit about that? And I know it was written in 2011. Have you seen some of your predictions come true?
Yeah, thanks for mentioning. So that was about 10 years ago, and really the book is a social history of private space flight. And what I did was we basically interviewed people in the private space industry, and kind of like mostly highlighting the people that are behind the scenes of trying to get this industry going. And when I ended it, Actually, SpaceX was just like starting up. I interviewed Elon, I think back in 2008, and during that time, SpaceX was still an unknown. It was a question mark, especially for the space community, because he didn't come, from a traditional space industry background. Everybody wasn't sure exactly of what he's doing. And then, so fast forward 10 years, I ended the book with again, a question mark of if Elon actually succeeds, it would be a game changer for the industry. And so now, as you can see, Elon is and SpaceX is way ahead of everybody in terms of development, and he's done a lot of things from reusable rockets to creating and having the vision of going back to the moon and Mars. It's just exciting.
So you interviewed Elon before Elon was Elon.
Yes.
And to your point about the traditional space background, it's funny that you mentioned that, because a previous guest mentioned that the traditional way to establish yourself or develop a career in the space industry was to, for instance, work for NASA or support some other company that is supporting government. But now you see, entrepreneurs or people with this similar backgrounds entering this industry. And a great example of that is actually Karina Dries. So she started outside of the space industry and worked her way up into, quite an incredible position as the CEO and manager of the Mojave Spaceport. And we fortunately had her come and speak to us during my commercial space studies program. And she mentioned some of the hardships of entering a male-dominated industry. And very similar to you, you spent most of your professional career, working in this industry. Could you speak a little bit about this? Did you find anything difficult? Was it hard, or was it quite welcoming industry for you to enter?
Yeah, that's also a very important question. I think I was very lucky. Even way back when I was young, that I didn't have the difficulties that I guess you've heard of mostly from women who are like trying to be part of the industry, and that diversity was not exactly common in this particular industry. And I think I attribute this to my kind of like my upbringing, where my parents, specifically my father, didn't differentiate me from either if I was a boy or a girl, and I would say like I wanted to be an astronaut or I wanted to do things that normally girls are not thought of doing, and he would just basically say, "Yeah, go do it." So, so I grew up not having this black and white kind of view of people. I always look at people as people and not thinking about them as gender. So personally, I mean, if I walk in a room that I'm the only female, I don't really care, because I look at people more as individuals. So I would always say that, we talk about like glass ceilings or kind of the extent of kind of your bubble. I think we make our own glass ceilings in our own bubbles. And you extend it with your own, either your own passion or your will, because you're really, really interested or really gung-ho with what you're trying to achieve. And so, I've been really just lucky that in all of the areas and all of the organizations that I've been in, I've had actually pretty good relationships and actually mentors that just has nurtured me as just myself without any gender bias.
Incredible, and thank you for sharing that with us. You're also a big believer of giving back to the space community. Can you share some of the initiatives that you're involved with today?
Yeah, so and I think that again segues to what we're trying to do with SpaceBase. And as I mentioned in the beginning, I'm from the Philippines. If I didn't get that scholarship from the International Space University, I actually wouldn't, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't even know what my career path would have been, because there was just no opportunity, at least when I was growing up. And my thing is that I shouldn't be the lucky one. I think everybody should have the opportunity to be able to, make their dreams come true. And I always say that I never grew up, because my dreams of space when I was a kid, I mean, I'm living it, really. I haven't gone to space yet, but I am kind of like in a pathway to where I'm really passionate about it. So I think that if I can either inspire or help either kids to be interested in space and look at space and see that, yes, it is something that I can do, not just for astronauts or those that have the means to do it. That for me is very fulfilling. And so, yeah, we do a lot of outreach here. We talk to kids and from primary to high school kids here in New Zealand. I think we've actually done about 100 or more presentations over the past 4 years that we've been here. We also mentor startups as well. I mean, I really like talking to entrepreneurs or young entrepreneurs who've got like really great ideas, and if I can help them. And then also, I think on the networking side, being part of the International Space University kind of gives you a global network of people. And I also enjoy basically connecting people. So I think there's a lot to be said that, of course, you need to have the education and the sort of like the know-how to be successful in this industry. But I think having connections and who actually is a big part of being successful, and being able to connect people to the different parts of the world who are working in this industry, and seeing also kind of like impact that happens after that connection, for me, is very fulfilling.
That's incredible. And, along the road, I've had many mentors as well. And, I credit, a lot of their mentorship to where I've reached today, and including my coaches, some professors, and even entering the industry with some of my bosses that, have taken a chance on me and worked with me. So, I truly believe that giving back in the community, gives back in its own way in the future. So thank you for taking those initiatives. What do you think makes a great leader in the space industry?
I mean, I don't think that there is any one individual that you can say is the best. And I guess people would say, Elon Musk, even with all of his, he's got negative and positive sides to it, but being a visionary and also knowing what he wants and taking steps to doing it is certainly commendable and something to be admired. And so I tend to gravitate toward visionaries who actually do something about their ideas and their vision. Another example is the founders of the International Space University, like Peter Diamandis, where when they actually founded ISU, they were graduate students at a time when we were still in the Cold War, and the first program that they did garnered like over 100 students from countries that normally don't talk to each other politically, and then created this institution, educational institution, has been going on for 30 or more years now. And again, with Peter, another example of what he did, it was with the X Prize as well, where he jump-started the suborbital space industry with a prize. And when he started, he had no teams and he didn't have the 10 million prize money yet. So I think, I think you need to, in this industry, to thrive, you need to be a visionary. You need to take the risk as well, because it is a risky business. And I think the combinations of all of this and being open-minded for what's possible, because there's a lot of specialists out there who say that it's not possible. Just a few years ago, we thought that reusable rockets would never happen. And yet we can, and now you see it with SpaceX, just with every flight that they do.
Oh, so that's great. So visionaries who can execute on their visions. Who from the audience that's listening or watching would you want to reach out to you?
Yeah. So again, going back to our focus and mission with the SpaceBase, really interested in people specifically in areas, regions, and countries that do not have an inherent space industry, but want to. And so that goes from it doesn't matter whether you're a student who can actually be an activist for space, to industries that are looking at space as another industry to break into, so adjacent industries, to like local governments and government decision makers who are wondering what is the best way to actually break into the industry. What are the potential initiatives that can be done on kind of like a decision maker government level to create these potential initiatives. And then really interested in talking to students and also entrepreneurs and startups, and basically just sharing lessons learned.
Great. And how can they reach you?
You can just go to the spacebase.co website or email info@spacebase.co.
All right, great. Emeline, it was an absolute pleasure having you today. You shared a wealth of information, and this is a great topic, the democratization of space. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much, Daniel, for giving me the opportunity to talk. This was a fun interview. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. All right, everyone, that was another episode of the Final Frontier podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Penaranda. If you liked it, please like it, subscribe, follow us on Instagrams, on our social page. If you want to catch up on past episodes, another great resource is our website, the finalfrontierpodcast.com. I hope to catch you in the next one. Have a great day. Bye-bye.